The latest statistics from South African Social Security Agency, or SASSA, reveal that over 17 million South Africans applied for the 370 rands a month Social Relief of Distress Grant. This is marking a significant increase in demand for financial assistance. This indicated growing economic challenges, with many first-time applicants among the record numbers. KwaZulu-Natal had the highest number of applicants with 4.4 million applications. This was followed by Gauteng with 3.2 million and Limpopo with 2.3 million applications. Let's talk to Isobel Frye. She's the Executive Director of the Social Policy Initiative. Good afternoon, Isobel. The country is seeing a sea of red with that COSATU march. Obviously, putting into focus the kind of economic hardships that workers themselves are seeing. But what more of the 7.5 million beneficiaries that had been paid in August? If anything, it looks like things could get worse. How do you see it? And welcome to On Point.
Thank you very much for having me on point. I think the sequencing with the COSATU march and demands is really appropriate in terms of context. As we know, SASSA released a report last week that indicated that over 17 million applicants, people had applied for the 370 rand Social Relief of Distress Grant. But really what we're seeing is an unemployment and poverty crisis. This is not just one moment in time. I was looking at the SASSA figures over the last year, and in fact, it was actually in June that the application number reached 17 million for the first time. So in the last quarter, we've seen over 17 million people each month applying for the Social Relief of Distress, 370 rand, and yet only 8 million people are receiving it of the 17 million. So we need to ask ourselves the plight of the 9 million people who are not receiving it. I think on that point, we also just need to look at the total number of people who are finding themselves in destitution. So we had 17.1 million people applying for the Social Relief of Distress Grant in August. But in the last quarter of 2024, quarter two, the total number of people not in employment, education and training in South Africa was over 18.5 million people. So you asked whether this was indicative of what's going to happen in future. And I think if you compare the difference between the number of applications for the 370 grant and the number of people not in employment, education and training, the indications are that it certainly is going to increase with time. I think I also just wanted to raise two other points on that. We know that there was a business and government partnership that met last week, and they apparently came up with a number of different priorities that they were going to work on. For me, one of the distressing things as a researcher is that the total number of jobs that were promised by 2030 was 1 million plus 400,000 youth employment opportunities. But if you're looking at over 18 million people who are out of the labour market, and you compare that to 1 million jobs over 6 years, together with the knowledge that more than 800,000 people come into the labour market every year, we have to really realise that the growth that is being contemplated is not shared growth. And then we also need to remember that the 370 grant budget comes to an end at the end of this financial year. So that's the end of March 2025. There is no money on the books, as it were, for the 3-year rolling budget to replace the current 370 rand grants. So we do need to be very, very mindful of the fact that this is a critical time. We know that the Government of National Unity is coming under great surveillance for the work that they have done. We believe that the October MTBPS medium-term budget policy statement by the Minister of Finance really needs to signal an appreciation of the fact that workers are in crisis, as the COSATU strike and march indicated, but also people across the country are in crisis as they consider a future without access to jobs.
Yeah. Isobel, there's a number here that got me quite confused when I was reading and researching on this, that there is the 384,000 people who currently have jobs and are also applying for this 370 SRD grant. Surely that is not allowed. What can we read from this? And maybe while I still have you here, you talked about the sustainability and whether, you know, the public purse has the means and that it will stop. How bad could things get for the poorest of households should this stop this 370 SRD grant?
Thank you for those questions. I think firstly, just to be very mindful of the fact that there's an incredibly strict means test for the 370 Rand grant. So although there are a significant number of workers who are what we call the working poor, often their incomes fall below the national minimum wage, they might have applied, but given the income that is associated with whatever work they do, they will not be eligible. So as I indicated, 9 million people fewer than those who applied were actually approved in August. So people who are not eligible do not get through. They don't get that money. I think the question of the sustainability is one that needs to be seen in its broad context. So we are aware of the fact that the country is not growing. We're aware of the fact that at best, the business government partnership indicated they're looking at a 3% growth by next year. But we also need to realize, we need to ask the question, what will happen to our society if this money is not paid and is not increased over time? 55% of people live in poverty. That's not a viable, sustainable society. And I think that's the angle that we need to approach this with. Money can be found. And in our research at the SPI, we've indicated a number of different ways in which it can be found. That's the issue that needs to be faced by the GNU as a matter of urgency.
All right. Isobel Frye, thank you so much for your time. Isobel Frye, she's the Executive Director for the Social Policy Initiative. Thank you so much for your time, Isobel.